It all started with the smell. A strange, cloying mixture of damp earth, decaying paper, and something else. Something faintly sweet, almost like forgotten flowers. That's the first thing that hits you when you unlock a house that's been sealed for a decade. My story isn't a ghost story, not in the traditional sense. There were no rattling chains or spectral apparitions, but what I found was far more chilling, because it was real. And it all began in the house my grandfather, a man I barely knew, left to me in his will. To understand why I didn't just sell the place sight unseen, you need to know a little about me. I'm a 32-year-old architectural historian. I don't design new buildings. I spend my days poring over old blueprints, deciphering the lives of people who lived in homes centuries ago. For me, a house isn't just wood and stone. It's a vessel of stories, a silent witness to generations of joy, sorrow, and secrets. So when I inherited my grandfather Arthur's old Victorian house on the outskirts of a sleepy New England town, it felt less like a burden and more like a calling, a final, posthumous puzzle from a man who was a complete enigma to me. I only met him a handful of times as a child. He was a quiet, almost reclusive man with eyes that seemed to hold a deep, unshakable sadness. My mom never spoke much about him, only that he liked his privacy. After my grandmother passed away, he became even more of a hermit, and the house, once a place of sparse but warm holiday visits, became a fortress of solitude. When the lawyer's letter arrived, I felt a strange mix of grief for a man I wished I'd known, and a powerful academic curiosity. This was my chance to finally understand him, to piece together the life of Arthur Finch through the one thing he left behind, his home. The house stood on a small hill, partially shrouded by overgrown ivy and ancient oak trees that cast long, skeletal shadows in the late afternoon sun. It was a beautiful, melancholic relic, with a wraparound porch, a sagging turret, and windows like vacant eyes. The air inside was thick and heavy, dancing with dust motes and the slivers of light that pierced through the grimy panes. Every surface was covered in a thin gray film. It was like stepping into a photograph from another era. The first few days were a blur of practicalities, checking the plumbing, testing the ancient wiring, and battling dust bunnies the size of small animals. But as I worked, I began to explore. The main floor was a time capsule. A half-finished game of solitaire lay on a card table, the cards yellowed and curled. A pair of reading glasses rested on an open book, as if my grandfather had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any minute. In his study, I found shelves groaning under the weight of books on botany, local history, and surprisingly, cryptography. There were boxes of old photographs, but oddly none of him with anyone but my grandmother.
No friends, no siblings, no extended family. It was as if he had sprung into existence the day he married her. It was in the third week that my project took a turn. I'd cleared most of the main floors and decided it was time to tackle the basement. The door was a heavy oak plank in the kitchen with a simple iron latch. It opened onto a steep, narrow set of stone steps that descended into cool, musty darkness. I flicked a switch, and a single bare bulb flickered to life, casting a weak, jaundiced glow over the space. It was a completely ordinary, creepy old basement. A massive octopus-like furnace sat in the center, its metal tentacles snaking across the low ceiling. The walls were rough-hewn stone, weeping moisture. Shelves lined one wall holding dusty glass jars filled with what I presumed were my grandmother's preserved vegetables, their contents now a murky, unrecognizable sludge. The floor was packed earth, uneven and cold. I spent an afternoon down there clearing out cobwebs and old rotted furniture, feeling a sense of disappointment. For a man of so many books and quiet eccentricities, his basement was profoundly normal. There were no secrets here. Or so I thought. The first hint that I was wrong came from a draft, a cold, persistent stream of air that seemed to come from nowhere. The basement had no windows, and the door at the top of the stairs was sealed tight. I walked the perimeter, running my hand along the damp stone walls, trying to find the source. And then I saw it. Tucked away behind the furnace, in the darkest corner of the basement, was a section of the stone wall that didn't quite match the rest. The mortar was a slightly different color, and the stones were more uniform, less weathered. It was subtle, something only a person obsessed with architectural details would even notice. My heart started to beat a little faster. I pushed against it. Nothing. I ran my hands over the surface, feeling for a hidden latch or a loose stone. It was solid. Frustrated, I went back upstairs to the study, my mind racing. I remembered seeing a rolled-up set of blueprints on my grandfather's desk. I dismissed them as duplicates of the house's original plans, but now, maybe not. I carefully unrolled the brittle yellowed paper. It was indeed a blueprint of the house, but with handwritten annotations in my grandfather's spidery script. And there, in the basement section, was a small rectangular area behind the furnace that was marked with a single, faint X. Next to it, he had written a strange sequence of numbers and a small sketch of a gear. It wasn't part of the original design. It had been added. My pulse thundered in my ears. This was it. This was the puzzle. I rushed back down to the basement, blueprint in hand. I found the spot again and began examining the stones more closely, comparing them to the sketch. The drawing seemed to indicate that one of the stones, about waist-high, was a pivot point.
I pushed, I pulled, I tried to pry at it with a crowbar. It wouldn't budge. I was about to give up when my hand brushed against a small, almost invisible hole drilled into the mortar just beside the stone. It was no bigger than a keyhole. It took me another hour of frantic searching through my grandfather's workshop before I found it. A long, thin metal rod with the tip shaped like a gear, exactly like the one in the drawing. It was a custom-made key. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the hole. It slid in perfectly. I turned it. There was a low, grinding sound, stone against stone, a sound that hadn't been heard in decades. The section of the wall didn't swing open like a door. Instead, it moved, slowly, heavily. It recessed into the wall behind it, revealing a dark, narrow opening. The draft I had felt before now rushed out, carrying with it a smell that was different from the rest of the basement. It was drier, with the scent of old wood, leather, and something else. A faint metallic tang like old blood or rust. My logical mind was screaming at me, "Stop! Call someone! This isn't normal!" But the historian in me, the part that craved answers, was too strong. I grabbed a heavy flashlight and stepped through the opening. I was in a small, windowless room, no bigger than a walk-in closet. The air was unnaturally still and cold. Unlike the rest of the basement, this room had a wooden floor and paneled walls. It was a hidden study. In the center of the room was a single wooden desk and a straight-backed chair. On the desk sat an old leather-bound journal and a tarnished silver inkwell. A thick layer of dust covered everything, proof that no one had been in here for a very, very long time. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, and my breath caught in my throat. Sitting in the corner of the room, slumped in an old armchair, was a figure. A man. He was dressed in clothes from what looked like the 1950s, a tweed jacket, flannel trousers, and worn leather shoes. His head was tilted down, his face obscured by shadows, and his hands rested limply in his lap. He was perfectly still. For a paralyzing moment, I thought he was real, a body preserved by the cold, dry air. My mind reeled. Who was he? Why was he here? My grandfather. Was he a killer? I took a shaky step forward, my flashlight beam trembling. I reached out a hand, then snatched it back.
I had to know. Forcing myself to move, I slowly approached the chair. The light washed over the figure's face, and a wave of dizzying relief, immediately followed by profound confusion, washed over me. It wasn't a man. It was a mannequin. A ridiculously, terrifyingly lifelike mannequin. The skin had the unnatural smoothness of wax, pale and cold-looking. The hair was real. The glass eyes, which seemed to strangely catch the light of my flashlight, stared blankly into the middle distance. It was dressed in my grandfather's clothes, or at least clothes from his era. Why?
Why would anyone build a secret room in their basement to store a mannequin? It was bizarre. It was unnerving. It felt ritualistic. This is where things get really strange. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have run out and called the police, or would your curiosity have gotten the better of you, just like mine? Let me know in the comments. For me, the fear was quickly being replaced by an all-consuming need for answers. The mannequin wasn't the secret. It was a distraction. The real secret, I knew, had to be in that journal on the desk. My hands shook as I picked it up. The leather was cracked and cold. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was my grandfather's, but it was different from the neat, controlled script in his other notes. This was frantic, desperate. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. October 12th, 1958. It is done. He is gone. I did what had to be done to protect her. To protect everything no one can ever know. The weight of it is unbearable. I have brought him down here, to this room I prepared. He will stay here, with me, forever, a constant reminder of my failure. My blood ran cold. He is gone. I have brought him down here. The mannequin. Was it a stand-in? A macabre memorial for a real person? I flipped through the pages. It wasn't a daily diary. The entries were sporadic, separated by months, sometimes years. They were all short, filled with guilt and sorrow. May 4th, 1962. I saw his face in a crowd today. For a fleeting second, I thought it was him. My heart seized. But it was just a stranger. He is always with me. He sits in the corner, silent, accusing. He was talking about the mannequin as if it were a real person. Was my grandfather mentally unwell? Was this whole thing a delusion born from some deep-seated grief? September 21st, 1975. Your mother was born today. I wish you could have been there. I wish you could have known her. I see you in her smile sometimes. Forgive me, brother. Forgive me. Brother. The word hit me like a physical blow. My grandfather had a brother. No one in the family had ever mentioned a brother. I had never seen a picture, never heard a name. I frantically searched the old photo albums in my memory, trying to place another face next to my grandfather's. Nothing. It was like he had been erased from history. I kept reading, my mind struggling to piece it all together. The journal didn't explain what happened. It was just an endless cycle of remorse. It was clear that whatever happened, it happened in this house, and the secret was buried here. Literally. I looked at the mannequin again, then at the wooden floorboards. The historian in me took over. I started tapping the floor, listening for variations in the sound. In the very center of the room, directly under the desk, the sound was different. It was hollow. Using the same crowbar from before, I wedged it between two of the floorboards. The wood was old. It splintered with a groan.
Beneath it wasn't earth. It was more wood. The lid of a shallow, built-in crate. It was nailed shut. With a surge of adrenaline, I pried it open. The smell that rose from the opening was a violation. It was nothing like the dry, musty scent of the room, the old wood and leather.
This was the raw, cloying smell of decay. The faint metallic tang I'd noticed before was now an overpowering wave, thick and undeniable. Inside the crate, wrapped in what looked like an old, oil-stained tarpaulin, was a long, heavy object. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, what I was about to find. This was no mannequin. I hesitated. This was the point of no return. Once I saw what was inside, I could never unsee it. I could no longer pretend this was just an eccentric old man's hobby. This was real. I took a deep breath and gently, carefully, unwrapped the corner of the tarpaulin. Beneath it was not a body, at least not a complete one. It was a collection of objects. On top lay a small, corroded metal box. Beside it, a wallet, its leather warped and stiff, and beneath that, wrapped in another layer of cloth, was the unmistakable shape of a human skull and a pile of bones. They were yellowed with age, brittle and frail. I felt a wave of nausea and stumbled back, gasping for air. This was it. The truth. A man had died here. A man had been hidden here for over half a century. My grandfather's brother. I forced myself to be methodical, to be the historian, not the terrified grandson. I carefully lifted the metal box from the crate. It was unlocked. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed cotton, were a handful of black and white photographs and a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The first photo I picked up showed two young men, almost identical, standing with their arms around each other, grinning at the camera. They both had the same dark hair, the same strong jaw, the same sad eyes I recognized from pictures of my grandfather. It was him and his twin brother. On the back, an inscription: Arthur and Thomas, summer of '57. Thomas. He had a name. I untied the ribbon and unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was not my grandfather's. It was looser, more flamboyant. It was a letter from Thomas to a woman named Eleanor. It was a love letter, passionate and desperate, begging her to run away with him. He talked about a plan, about getting money, about a final job that would set them up for life. The subsequent letters grew darker. He was in trouble. He owed dangerous people a lot of money. He was scared. The last letter was addressed to my grandfather, Arthur. It was a confession. Thomas had gotten involved in a robbery. Something went wrong. Someone got hurt. He was hiding, and the people he'd crossed were looking for him. He was coming to the house, to the one person he knew he could trust. The letter was dated October 11th, 1958, the day before the first entry in my grandfather's journal.
Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The secrecy, the guilt, the hidden room. This wasn't a story of a cold-blooded murder. It was a tragedy. Thomas, on the run and desperate, must have come here seeking refuge. What happened next, I could only guess. Maybe there was a fight. Maybe the people he owed money to found him here. Maybe it was an accident. Whatever happened, it ended with Thomas dead in this basement. And my grandfather, Arthur, a quiet, simple man, was faced with an impossible choice. He could go to the police and try to explain that his criminal twin brother had died in his house, risking being implicated in the whole mess, bringing shame and danger to his family and the woman he loved, my grandmother. Or he could bury the secret. He chose to bury it. He built this hidden room, this tomb, this shrine. He laid his brother to rest under the floorboards and then created a stand-in, a silent effigy to sit with him in his guilt for the rest of his life. He erased his brother from the family history, not out of malice, but to protect everyone. He carried this monumental secret, this profound grief, entirely alone for over 50 years. The quiet, sad man I barely knew was a man living in a self-imposed prison, with his brother's ghost sitting in the corner. The weight of it all crushed me. The dust-filled room seemed to shrink, the silence pressing in.
I looked from the bones in the crate to the mannequin in the chair, and for the first time I felt an overwhelming wave of sympathy for my grandfather. His whole life had been an act of penance. Now, his secret was mine, and I had a choice to make, just as he did. I could seal the room back up, leave the house, and let the secret die with me. Let Thomas remain a ghost and Arthur a mystery. Or I could bring the truth to light, giving Thomas a proper burial and my grandfather, perhaps, a final peace. But it would mean exposing everything, dredging up a painful past, and inviting a world of official scrutiny into our lives. Have you ever been faced with a moral dilemma where there's no easy answer? What do you think the right thing to do was? If you're finding this story as gripping as I did living it, maybe take a second to hit that subscribe button. It really helps, and you won't want to miss how this concludes. I sat there for what felt like hours in the cold, silent room with the ghosts of two brothers. I thought about the heavy sadness in my grandfather's eyes. It wasn't the look of a killer. It was the look of a man broken by loss and guilt. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who made a desperate choice to protect his family. And he lived with the consequences every single day. He built this secret room not just to hide a body, but to have a place to mourn, a place where he could be with his brother without the world knowing. In the end, I knew what I had to do. My grandfather had carried this burden for his entire life. It wasn't mine to carry for the rest of mine.
And Thomas, he deserved more than a crate under the floorboards. He deserved a name, a resting place. The next morning, I made the call. I didn't call 911. I called the non-emergency line for the local police department and asked to speak to a detective. I told him, as calmly as I could, that I was renovating my late grandfather's house and that I had found what I believed to be human remains. The two detectives who arrived were quiet, respectful men. They didn't treat me like a suspect. They listened with grim patience as I showed them the hidden room, the journal, the letters, the bones. They handled everything with a gentle professionalism that I was immensely grateful for. The next few weeks were a blur of coroners, forensic teams, and quiet conversations. They confirmed the remains were Thomas Finch, and the cause of death, after all this time, was determined to be a blunt force trauma to the head consistent with a fall down the stone steps leading to the main basement. It was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. My grandfather hadn't killed his brother, he had simply found him. His only crime was the cover-up. And given the circumstances, the robbery, the dangerous people Thomas was involved with, I finally understood why he did it. Fear. He was afraid. With the officially closed case, Thomas was finally given a proper burial. I had him laid to rest in the small-town cemetery next to Arthur and my grandmother. 3 names on 3 headstones. The family finally reunited in death in a way they never could be in life. I didn't sell the house. I couldn't. It was no longer just a building to me. It was a testament to a silent, lifelong promise between 2 brothers. I spent the next year restoring it, not erasing its history, but honoring it. I fixed the porch, replaced the windows, and let the light back in, but I left the hidden room exactly as I found it, minus its grim contents. I sealed the stone door, but I kept the key. It's a quiet place now, a memorial. Sometimes, late at night, when the old house groans and settles, I think about my grandfather. I no longer see him as a stranger. I see a man who was defined by a single, tragic moment. A man who loved his brother so much that he was willing to become his keeper in death, carrying the weight of his secret so that everyone else could live in peace. The house taught me that some secrets aren't born of malice, but of love and profound sorrow, and that sometimes the most haunting ghosts are the ones we carry inside ourselves. Do you think I did the right thing? Was it right to expose a secret that had been buried for over 50 years? Or should I have let my grandfather and his brother rest in peace, their story untold? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. I'd be genuinely interested to hear them.